much.
Pleasure.
Now, before the end of the programme, we'll have tomorrow's front pages. But first, prestigious is the word actor Peter Davison chose recently to suggest the BBC's current attitude towards Doctor Who. The latest series came to an end recently. The programme will mark its 50th anniversary later this year. As part of the celebrations, the British Film Institute has been screening stories from each incarnation of the Doctor, and this month it reached the 1980s, a post-Star Wars era when prestigious was the last word BBC bosses would have used to describe Doctor Who, or indeed any of its dwindling array of science fiction offerings. Yet Doctor Who managed to stay on air until 1989, despite the reputation that it was a bit rubbish. We asked the BBC's Sean Lay, a leading Whovian, apparently that's the correct word, to go back to the 80s and explain.
Looks just like a muddy old quarry, doesn't it? In fact, this is another world.
Sean, put this back on.
All right. It is a muddy old quarry in the home counties. Yet during Doctor Who's heyday, places like this would have been full of alien invasions and rubber monsters aplenty. Yet it still managed to scare the living daylights out of generations of kids, this one included. Then something changed. For this was the 1980s. It was a rough ride in the 1980s. By now it wasn't just the police box which dated Doctor Who. Star Wars and other big-budget films delivered science fiction with panache.
Meanwhile, here on BBC One at some other point in time, Doctor Who.
On the small screen, Doctor Who had a bold, glossy new look, but the way it was made hadn't received a similar makeover.
By the time the 1980s came along, people were used to a faster pace, they were used to more complex characters, and I think that there was a simplicity about the way Doctor Who was doing things that was making it look increasingly out of step.
In studios, several cameras covered the same scene. A show which relied on special effects, time-consuming to get right, was recorded in the same way as a courtroom drama or a soap.
I was a Time Lord, playing a Time Lord, and we had no time. We used to have to do things by, had to pull the plug at 10 o'clock. And if we didn't get that scene in, we didn't ever get it in.
Right, I'd like to do that once more, please. Can you try and frame that bubble up?
We can't.
What?
So sorry, it's 10 o'clock.
Right, fine.
Tegan! Fire again!
A film would probably have been a bit more subtle in lighting this futuristic sea base, but time and TV tradition served cruelly to expose the limits of Doctor Who's budget. Just a few weeks after The Green Sea Monster came this. Graham Harper, relatively new to directing, was stirring things up. His Doctor Who debut showed the programme could change. He even managed to get the lights turned down.
I knew the way to present it was to use single camera much more than had been normally used.
First of all, we need to find our way to the TARDIS.
Instead of doing a whole scene at once, cutting between several cameras, Harper tried to record like a feature film, one carefully planned shot at a time, editing them together later. This month, Harper's story has been given the accolade of a special showing at the British Film Institute on London's South Bank, part of celebrations for the programme's 50th year.
It's the relentlessness of the pace of the story. It starts off high and just goes up from there, and it's just so exciting.
It's got a punch to it, there's a grittiness.
Which begs the question, could 80s Doctor Who have been made this way all the time?
Could I do a single camera shoot in the time given? I had a good try, but in the end, after the first block, where I got myself into serious trouble and didn't complete, I had to stick to multi-camera studio. In other words, using 4 or 5 cameras a scene.
You're going to go scrubbing up and you need to get to here. Like that, okay?
But at least Harper did get the opportunity to put his directorial stamp on a moment that is uniquely Doctor Who, the change of lead actors.
I must have been listening to Day in the Life of, which is a fantastic piece of music by the Beatles, And the end of it is the orchestra just driving itself kind of bonkers to a big explosion of a big piano chord. I could imagine how I would visualise that, and so I use that as my template.
Colourful costumes and celebrity casting were techniques used by John Nathan Turner, producer for the whole of the 1980s, to keep Doctor Who in the public eye.
The programme certainly attracted some amazing names. The problem was that I think sometimes the way they were directed or the way they were dressed undermined the fact that they were, you know, good actors essentially. If they were being encouraged to camp it up.
By Jove, yes! Welcome!
Sometimes the programme looked less drama, more panto.
How utterly evil!
Thank you.
Casting as the new Doctor an actor with a reputation for visual comedy caused some to grumble.
Yes, they're just jealous. I got to play my spoons on Kate O'Mara's front. And those spoons did bounce. I just arrived with my bag of tricks and started playing the role. But then as we went through, I realised, there's more. This is a great acting role. This is one of the best acting roles in television, really, because you could do so much with it. You can go so many places.
There was a pantomime aspect to Doctor Who, but we did manage to use that to our advantage in the Happiness Patrol, in which you have all that glitz and camp, and it's deeply, deeply sinister.
Tell them what I'm trying to say, Gilbert.
He makes sweets that kill people.
The trouble with doing that is there was a danger that when people looked at it, all they saw was the surface. And in fact, as soon as they heard that the title was The Happiness Patrol, people assumed the worst.
A more contemporary travelling companion, Ace, allowed Doctor Who to engage in social commentary, exploring issues like racism.
The companion, who was usually female, was too often there to ask a question and trip over and need to get rescued. And I think audiences were quite tired of that. And it was only towards the end of the decade that a kind of hint of emotional intelligence crept in.
You said I was an emotional cripple, a social misfit.
Ace was the first step to what we have now, where a companion is a fully rounded, complex character.
It's not true. Believe me.
But there's nothing like a Doctor Who monster to scupper a writer's subtext.
I had this ambition that there would be quite a subtle but discernible lesbian subtext between Ace and Kara.
You're like me. Yeah?
The subtlety of that was sort of conveyed in the face and the close-up and the movement and everything. And all of this was kind of buried under these furry teddy bear heads, which was slightly disappointing.
Bold ideas like that are one answer to the question, was 80s Doctor Who rubbish? The former BBC controller Michael Grade was one who couldn't see beyond the effects.
I thought it was pathetic. I mean, I'd seen Star Wars, and I'd seen Close Encounters and E.T., and then I had to watch these cardboard things probably clonking across the floor.
You see, Fifi moves really badly, poorly animated, but she looks kind of great because, and here's where they drop these rocks on her, which are obviously plastic boulders that don't weigh anything at all. It's sort of the dichotomy of the show, that with the good design and the bad design in the same shot.
Even a quarter of a century later, though, in an age of CGI, some of the effects work still stands up to scrutiny.
Now, I remember this effect. This was a homage to Raiders of the Lost Ark, the melting Nazis from Raiders of the Lost Ark. And it's very effective.
It was brilliantly done. It was so simple. It was a very well made from wax. And then they got two industrial hair dryers on either side of the camera and blew onto it. So that was glorious.
Doctor!
Keep quiet, we're recording.
Soon, British TV viewers would be enjoying the delights of reality television instead, something Doctor Who predicted with the voyeuristic Ferosians. And like the people in charge of reality TV on Varos, the BBC decided it would be better off without the Doctor.
And cut it now.
The execution of Doctor Who in the 80s didn't always live up to its many bold ideas, but the youngsters who grew up with it then are the ones making the multi-award-winning programme now. Perhaps 80s Doctor Who was the catalyst.
There you are. Don't have nightmares. Now,